this is Marcia Freeland coming to you from the Norma Johnson Center. I'm presently on the Conservation Loop Trail near the Red Barn, and we have built something for your pleasure. There is a new footbridge, and this footbridge has wonderful benches for you to relax on, and this bridge will then lead you to our bird observation area that we'll be building later on this summer. Today kicks off our first day in our Interacting in Nature series, and we usually have children's programs on Tuesdays, but due to the situation that our country is in, we are filming instead. So today our topic is wildflowers. And so I'm going to introduce some guides that you could possibly use along your way as you get more experienced and want to learn more about what you're seeing along the trail. We have the Newcomb's Wildflower Guide. Supposedly it's a 4-step process where you answer questions and go through the guide, and it will take you to the wildflower that you are observing. So we do have several of these guides at the center, and if you are interested in possibly borrowing them, all you have to do is email us at info@normajohnsоncenter.com, and we'll get that information or be able to hook up with you so you could possibly use it along the trail. We also have a guide from Native Plants of Ohio, and this was put out by Beech Botanical Garden and Nature Preserve up in Alliance, and they did a really nice job of showing the plants, the wildflowers in Ohio with descriptions and pictures and all that. We also have several of these guides as well. For yourself, you can check out the Peterson Field Guide, a field guide to wildflowers, and you could use this. A lot of people are used to using the Peterson guides because they also have great guides that relate to other things such as birds and stuff in the United States. And then somewhere along the line we picked up this handy dandy chart, and it has the flowers in colors. And so it's just common roadside invasives, it says, but a lot of them we think are weeds are also wildflowers, and so we can see the pictures with that. Today though, we are going to be using something with our phones, and it's called iSeek, and it's an app where you can actually take a picture of the flower, and it will then tell you, or if it can't tell it, it won't tell you exactly. It'll tell you maybe the how it's related to other flowers and stuff, but it can ID the flower, and so you can specifically find out what that flower is all about. iSeek is also related to iNaturalist, and we'll give you more information later on or with this video. To use the iSeek app is you find what you're looking for. In this instance, we are choosing plants as the species that we're looking for. You find that, you find a flower, and with your app, you go ahead and you say you take a photo, and when you go close on it and take the photo, this is telling me the family that it's in, and I won't embarrass myself by not being able to pronounce that, but it tells me the family that it's in. And then it says species nearby in this taxon, and so I'm going to tap on that, and then it actually shows me a whole bunch of different types of flowers that could fall into that category. And if I was to compare what I found and what this looks like, it would be called the meadow hawkweed. Up here is another one, and so I could just say take another photo on my phone, come up to it, put it up to the flower, see that I know there's some sort of daisy, and this is actually telling me that it's an oxeye daisy. And so I can take a picture of it if I would like. And then that goes into my pictures, and so I have a record of that. And then I can also learn about that flower itself. And that's how you use the iSeek app. Okay, so we are now on the trail that leads to the clubhouse area. We have come up from the Red Barn parking area, and in this area, when we first got the property, people would take wildflower shaker seeds and they would shake it as they walked along the trail. So from here, to the boardwalk, which we will be going to, you will notice that we have lots of flowers. The only problem is they're mostly spring flowers, and we've already started into the summer. So some wildflowers come out different times of the year, and you can still ID them, but you would be looking at the leaves. So this stand right here is actually called foam flower, and it's this flower that's right here. It's on the end of it, but it also has a beautiful leaf with it. And this is foam flower. So this is another type of Ohio wildflower. Okay, along the trail, as well as out in the fields, and even in your backyard, you may find a leaf that's shaped like a heart. And if you happen to find that leaf, that is a violet. And not only does the violet get purple flowers, but sometimes they can get yellow flowers, and sometimes they can get a white flower. And the violet is also a home or a place, a host plant for the meadow fritillary. And so they grow up on the violets. Okay, if you've ever been on a hike with me, you always hear me point out the bloodroot. And the bloodroot is one of my favorite plants, as well as flowers in the spring. In the spring, it gets a beautiful white flower, and this does not do it justice. It gets a beautiful white flower that comes up through the middle. But it's also easy to identify. And so in this section right here, we have some baby bloodroot just coming up. And you can kind of see the shape of the leaf. The cool thing about the bloodroot is it was used, or is still used, as some sort of heart medicine. If you would happen to dig up the root, there's actually two roots, and if you break them in half, they look like they're bleeding. And that's why it gets the name bloodroot. Up here on the trail, we have a larger bloodroot coming up, and we also have where you can see the flower pod was there. But it also takes on a different look. A lot of times I call the bloodroot plant the Batman plant, and because it looks like the Batman signal. Throughout the summer, the bloodroot leaf gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then takes on the look of a big elephant ear. Right now I am close to the boardwalk that is along the trail that takes you from the clubhouse up to the wetland, and we are on the conservation loop. And on the corner we have the shagbark hickory tree, and you can find that ID for the shagbark hickory tree by our tree ID signs. And how the tree ID signs work is if you stand directly in front of the sign, then the tree behind it is the tree that we're talking about. So close to the shagbark hickory, I was very happy to discover we have Trillium. Now Trillium is your state wildflower, and in an area where the land has not been disturbed, a lot of times the Trillium is all over the hillsides. The unfortunate part about the Norman Johnson Center is we have been mined several times. And by disturbing the land, we do not have this wildflower as much. But here, in front of the shagbark hickory, we have the leftover leaves of the Trillium, and this is what the flower looks like. Sometimes the flower can also take on like a reddish purple in color, but the Trillium is also another one of my favorites, and I'm very, very happy when I find those along the trail. Okay, along the boardwalk is this plant called Jewelweed. Some people know it as touch-me-nots. And the cool thing about the Jewelweed is when it has a flower pod on it and the flower has not come out yet, you can lightly touch the flower pod and sometimes it will pop a seed out at you and scare you. And those seeds are actually what replants it, of course, for the future. And sometimes you'll come across it and it's too late and the flower's already out, so you can't do the touch-me-not. But when it's first coming up like this, it actually it has a reddish stem, and I'm just going to go ahead and pull this. I wouldn't recommend pulling plants, but we have plenty of jewelweed in this area. But you can see that it has a reddish plant root. It also looks like you can see through the stem. Now, if you are in the forest and you are getting bitten by bugs, or you think that you've touched poison ivy, then you can take the stem and kind of cut it open. And when you do that, there's a fluid in there. And so with that fluid, you can then rub it on your skin, and it helps keep that bug bite or poison ivy from spreading, as well as the bug bite from itching. So that's one way. People sometimes harvest jewelweed as well, and they harvest it and they smash it down and they can make a soap. And with that soap, if you've been outdoors and you think you've been around poison ivy, that's another thing that you can use, is the soap to wash your arms and your legs and stuff to keep the poison ivy from getting all over you. Now, a cool factor with the jewelweed, it has all these tiny, tiny pieces of hair all over the back of the leaf, and we can't really see them. But if we were to take a container of water or go to the wetland and push that leaf down into the water, the whole back end of this leaf turns a silver color. And the reason why it does that is it's kind of holding the oxygen in, the air and stuff into that leaf, and allowing that leaf to bring on that silver color. Just a cool little thing to try, an experiment to try. Now, this jewelweed can get very, very high in the forest. So it is not a plant that just stays low. And guess what? The wildlife love it. And the deer love it. And so when you're walking along the boardwalk, you'll notice that the tops of the jewelweed are missing. And the reason why they're missing is some deer has come along and ate the tops. Okay, we're still on the boardwalk, so there's lots and lots to see. So along the boardwalk, we also have this plant called the false Solomon seal. And the Solomon seal, there's also a Solomon seal. And the difference between the two is where the flowers are at. So the false Solomon seal is this flowered plant, or I'm sorry, leafed plants like this. And if you notice, there used to be a flower on the end. The flower was like a big little white plume. This is false Solomon seal. If it was just Solomon seal, this flower would not exist. And along the bottom here, there would be little tiny flowers. And that would make it Solomon seal. So just hanging out on the boardwalk, on the conservation loop down from the clubhouse, you can see all kinds of wildflowers. We are headed down from the wetland trail, which is right over here, down towards the Red Barn. And the Norma Johnson Center in the fall has Queen Anne's lace everywhere. And it just so happens that it's starting to flower on our today's visit. And so this is Queen Anne's lace. It is also known as some people call it the bird's nest plant, because in the fall, when it dies off, it will kind of make a little cup that looks like a bird's nest. Thank you for joining us on our wildflower hike today, and we happen to be right back where we started. So if you think about hiking at the Norma Johnson Center, think about little circles, especially on the conservation loop. You can circle around to the clubhouse, the boardwalk, and come back across the suspension bridge, and that's your one little circle. You can also go clubhouse, boardwalk, and up to the wetland, and come out at the top, and come right down here to the bottom. So thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.